Okay, today what I'm going to be talking about is the metric system. And of course, whenever I talk about the metric system, I'm talking about Systems International. And the reason I'm going over the metric system is so that you can understand how everybody in the entire planet, globe, Earth, uses the metric system except for Estados Unidos, or the United States. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a little acronym, and I'm going to go from the very largest, and I'm going to say every person turns gray making, and I've got this down here for you so that you can remember it. Every person turns gray making, and you'll also notice that I've got caps on all of these. Okay? And the next part of that story, and I'm going to tell you in 3 different stories, is making every person turns gray, making King Hector dead. Don't call me. Okay, now I know a few of you have gotten the idea that says, well, I know that already because King Hector died drinking chocolate milk. Okay, but my problem is that if you'll go to this new system here, what it'll do is it'll blend everything together so that it'll make a lot more sense whenever I get through with the whole story. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this story here as in 3 different chapters. And so the last chapter was every person turns gray, making King Hector dead. Then don't call me, my new phone fell apart. And so you have the entire story of it, which is the entire outline of the book. Every person turns gray, making King Hector dead. Don't call me, my new phone fell apart. So we're going to go back, and we're going to go back to this system here. High diddle diddle right in the middle. And the reason I'm saying this system is because this is the one you're most familiar with, because this is the everyday thing. And of course, this system is so easy to remember. And I also like to equate things with 3s. In other words, 3 things are easy to remember. And I say the metric system is as easy as 1, 2, 3. And then under the 1, I put an A because it goes first in the alphabet. And then there's 2 O's, and then there's 3 I's. Now this is the A says it's large, and the O says it's large, and the I says it's small. So this is big, and this over here is small. Okay? So now let's go ahead and put the things on there. It's 1A, 2 zeros, or 2 O's, then 3 I's. Remember, whenever we see an I in the metric system and we're talking about this everyday usage of things, we automatically know that it is small. And of course, this is the 10 system. In other words, what we do with the 10 system is we say it's the decimal system. And then on the reverse side, and the bigger one is a bigger kid, is what I say. And so we call this deca. Okay, so it's deca and deci. Now, the abbreviations for this is DA, and the abbreviation for this is D. This right here, I can't ever remember what the middle of it is, but I know that this big one over here is going to kill me, and that's with 1 L. Okay? And what I'm doing is I'm going back and I'm filling in all of these prefixes so that I can go ahead and use those at a later time. And then, of course, I'm talking about small over here, and I know that this will kill me because it's big, but this one over here will just make me ill, okay? And then I start doing my numbers because I've got to go ahead and apply numbers to this. And I say this is 1 over 100, and I start thinking of money, of course, and I start saying, well, what's 1 part of $1? And of course, I think automatically, what is 1 part of $1? Cent. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say centi, okay? And then I say, well, I've got all of them except for this last one, and I remember hecto down here, so heck, I can't even remember that one, so that helps me, okay? So I call it hecto, okay? And then this gives me all the prefixes in the real life, in other words, what we see every day. In other words, I weigh 100 kilograms, okay? And so that lets you know exactly how much I weigh. But of course, if you don't know the metric system, well then of course you don't know what I'm talking about. So that's a good language barrier. And if you're going to travel the world, you're going to need to know the metric system. And then of course, over here, I have something else, and it's every person turns gray making. And over here, I like to equate it to the macro. In other words, macro means humongous, you know, like, and in this particular room, what I'm thinking about is interplanetary travel. I'm thinking about the distance between the sun and the earth, and then the distance between galaxies. I'm thinking about just humongous numbers that we don't deal with, that you just about have to be a professional or really extend your mind if you use these every day. But anyway, what these basically are the macro. And of course, with the macro, what I know about all of them is they all end in A. So that makes it easy. In other words, if we see something that ends in A, and if it's real big, we automatically know that it is humongous. It's macro. And of course, whenever I start in my mind and I start thinking, well, interplanetary travel and everything like that, I start thinking of extraterrestrials. And so I start saying, well, extraterrestrial. And the only extraterrestrial I know is a fellow by the name of E.T. Okay? And E.T. has a friend, okay? And they are IG, and EG. Okay? Now, when we left off over in the part over here, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and fill out these numbers here. This is 1 over 1,000. This is 1 over 10. This is 10. This is 100. And this is 1,000. Now, another way of writing this would be 10 over 1. And then another way of writing it would be 10 to the first power. And another way of writing this would be 100 over 1, or 10 to the second power. In other words, that tells you a 1 and 2 zeros. Okay? Then this one would be 10 to the third power. And this would be 1,000 over 1. So all of these show you the different sizes for this one here. All of these are the different powers for here. All of these are the different powers for here, and all of these are the different powers for here. So then what I want to do is I want to go to this side. Over here, it's 1/10, okay? Or it's 10. Let me change the pen here. 10. It'll be 10 to the minus 1 power. This would be 10 to the minus 2 power. This would be 10 to the minus 3 power. Okay? And then what I do is I also have to have the fractional or the decimal representation. So that's 1/10, that's 0, 1, that's 0, 1, 1. And whenever I have like 1 over a million, that tells me, or whenever I have a 3, that tells me it's 2 zeros, but it goes over to the 3rd place. So that lets me know what that is. And so all of these can show me what the decimal system is, or the decimal system that we use every day. Okay? And all of these, like this is deci, centa, milli, kilo, hecto, and deca. And of course we have the same thing over here. Of course, over here it's much easier. What we do is we started off with, or we left off with 10 to the 3rd power, meaning 10 to the 3rd power. So what we're going to do with mega is we're going to make it to the 6th power, this to the 9th power, this to the 12th power, and of course the difference of this is 3. So you can tell that the next one would be 10 to the 15th, okay? And this would be to the 18th, 21, and 24, okay? And so these let you know what those are. And I've left off this because these are 2 new ones. But actually, to get back to the story, IG and EG have some long-lost friends. And so they also end their names with an A because they are gigantic, they are humongous. And what we'll do is we'll talk about those in just a moment. But what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll go to this small part, and remember, my new phone fell apart. And of course, the whole thing is every person turns gray, making King Hector dead. Don't call me, my new phone fell apart. So this would be a microscopic room. It would be like a, I don't know, an intensive care room, okay, like a medical facility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say these all end with a certain letter also, and that is an O. And of course, the way I know it's always O's is because to me an O represents very small to nothing, okay? And that's where we are at this point. They're very small, nothing, okay? So I'm going to make all of these O's. And of course, there's 2 new ones on it also. But anyway, the intensive care room that we're talking about, I see an, all right, intensive care room. I see an intensive care room. I see, and what do I see in that intensive care room? I see an EMT, an emergency medical technician. And he's standing over there in the corner, and he's TTing, okay? All right, so anyway, this is the last picture that I want to put in your head. I want to put intensive care room. I see an intensive care room. I see an intensive care room, and an EMT is TTing, okay? All right, and so that's basically it, except for like we did with the other system, we're also talking about 10 systems, okay? And so this would be, the last one was 10 to the minus 3. We're going with increments of 3. So we'll say this is 10 to the minus 6, 10 to the minus 9, 10 to the minus 12, then 10 to the minus 15, then 10 to the minus 18, 10 to the minus 21, and then 10 to the minus 24. Okay, now in a little bit of a review here, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this, and we're going to say, well, this is a decimal point and 23 zeros and a 1, okay? And that lets you know what each of these representations are. For example, this doesn't have a decimal point here. It's just 1 and an O. but this would be to the -6, it would be a decimal point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it's the number 6, and it would be the 1. That would be 1 micro whatever, okay? And all of these are, whenever we look at them, all of these are what we call prefixes. In other words, whenever we say prefixes, what we're talking about basically is that all of these things go before a base word, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to have a base word, and so what I'm going to do is, of course, the base words are, whenever we have mass, we don't say weight. What we say is we say grams, okay? And whenever we say grams, a lot of people don't have the realization of what a gram is. But a gram is like a gym clip, or a classic example of a gram would be this. So if you put this in your hand and you felt it, that would be a gram, okay? So if you had if you had a kilogram, 1,000 of this in your hand, it would weigh 2.2 pounds, okay? So gram measures mass. In other words, the part that mass is the amount of matter in an object, okay? And then, of course, we have another system of measure, and of course this was brought about by Coca-Cola Bottling Works. Whenever they came out, they wanted to go international. And so what happened was you could have a bottle of Coke, and it would be a quart of Coke, and it would be 29 cents. And what would sitting next to it would be a 2-liter bottle of Coke. It would be sitting right next to it, and it was also 29 cents. So what everybody did is they picked up the 2-liter bottle of Coke, and of course Coca-Cola became international. Whenever they made parts, they could make it for all over the place. And as is the Coke, the quart bottle of Coke went out of style, so everybody buys a 2-liter bottle of Coke, and half of that 2-liter bottle of Coke is a liter. And of course, I'm going to spell it the international way, liter. And then of course the last one is of course distance. Liters measures fluids, grams measure mass, and so we have one more thing that we also put all of these prefixes before, and that's distance. And of course, international spelling of meters is the way it sounds, and so it is meters. And of course, what a meter is, so that you'll have an understanding of what a meter is. A meter is 39.24 inches. Now, whenever I say 39.24 inches, that is a meter, a yardstick, which is 36 inches, okay? And then whenever you have 39.24, it's 3.24 inches farther, so that is about this far. And what I like to do is, whenever I was younger, I used to play this game called Mother May I. It's like Red Rover, and whoever ride over. But it was also a game called Mother May I, and what you do is you'd say, a person would get in front and they would say, well, you can take 2 giant steps. And so a giant step in Mother May I is 39.24 inches, okay? If you take 1,000 of those giant steps from Mother May I, you would have gone a kilometer. So now you know the distance of a kilometer. It's 1,000 giant steps. So this is a meter, this is a yard. Meter is a little bit longer, a little bit wider than a yard, okay? And what you basically do is you can put any of these prefixes before any of those base words, and you can understand the metric system. And of course, the key to understanding the metric system would be, of course, whenever you want to move from one to another. For instance, if I ask you to say, tell me how many inches there are in a mile, you'd get out your calculator and then you'd start figuring it up. And what I'd like to do is say every person turns gray, making King Hector dead. Don't call me, my new phone fell apart. Okay? And so if I have 14 decameters, okay, and if I want to change it, it would be like 1 and 4 and then the decimal point and then decameters. And if I want to change it to, well, let's see, this is don't call me, so that's micros. And so if I wanted to change it to micros, all I'm doing is I'm moving my decimal point. So if I want to change it to this, I just add my zeros, and I've automatically changed it with just moving the decimal point. So if I want to go with whichever one I want to go with, for instance, the 14 decameters. If I want to go to micrometers, all I got to do is just say 140,000 micrometers. Okay? And so that lets you know how you can convert. It lets you know also how you can do the other things. The only other thing is the new part on here. Now, this one here, I can't remember exactly. This is Yetta, and this is Yoda. EG and IG have some long lost friends, and they are called Zoda and Yetta. And of course, this would be 10 to the 24th. In other words, that would be 1 with 24 zeros behind it. And of course, the other one would be this one here, and this would be EPTO, and this would be octo. Okay? And of course, this would be a decimal point, 23 zeros, and then the 1. So 0, 23 times, and then the decimal, and then the 1. It would be the decimal point, 23 zeros, and then the 1. And that's how you do the metric system. And of course, you can play with this, and also, if you want to, you can change your version of it. But a good way to remember it is just to get the story down so that you have each chapter down, and of course go over it. And once you go over it about 5 to 7 times in your mind, you'll be able to recite it for the rest of your life. And that's basically the metric system. Thank you very much for watching. See you later.